The downtown Los Angeles loft space pulsed with kinetic energy. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, glinting off sleek wood floors and exposed industrial beams. Within this quintessentially hip locale, a production meeting for Practical Magic, the hotly anticipated remake of the 1998 cult classic, was well underway. At the head of a large rustic farmhouse table sat Sandra Bullock, the film's producer and lead actress reprising the role of Sally Owens. Her expression was one of polite attentiveness as one of the various studio execs droned on about promotional media tours and merchandising opportunities. A subtle throat clearing caused Sandy to glance over at her friend and co-star Nicole Kidman, who had subtly gotten her attention. The two shared a barely perceptible look of mild boredom before Nicole leaned over. "I can't wait for this to actually get cooking so we can start the real fun," she murmured in a low aside, giving Sandra's shoulder a conspiratorial nudge. Sandy offered her a wry smirk in response, opening her mouth to reply, when she was abruptly cut off by a sharp rapping of knuckles on the heavy oak door. All eyes turned toward the unexpected disruption. "Come in," called out the exec who had been speaking, clear annoyance tinging his voice. The door swung open to reveal a sharply dressed woman with long chestnut tresses swept up in an artful ponytail. Even before she opened her mouth, Sandra felt her hackles instinctively raise. She recognized that coolly self-assured air from a mile away. "Terribly sorry to interrupt," the woman spoke in a studied Californian lilt as she breezed inside. "But I simply had to get in on the ground floor of this project while I can." With a sweeping look around the table of bemused faces, she came to an abrupt halt. Her gaze settled with singular focus upon Sandra and Nicole in a way that caused the fine hairs on the back of Sandra's neck to prickle. "Meghan Markle," the woman announced with a dazzling smile, sticking out her hand. "Actress, activist, philosopher, author, and dream addition to your cast, if I may be so bold." Sandra blinked dumbly in the wake of the bizarre non sequitur. Apparently the Duchess of Sussex herself had just invited herself to their meeting completely unsolicited. Thank you for stopping by, Miss Markle," one of the execs finally stammered out into the awkward silence. "But I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. We've already locked in the full cast and dash." Meghan gave a tinkling little laugh and a dismissive wave of her hand. "Oh, I'm sure that's not a problem at all. Every great production is open to adding extra sparkle whenever the opportunity arises." Her eyes settled meaningfully upon Sandra and Nicole. "And can you imagine a more iconic pair of powerhouse diviners than the three of us?" Nicole turned to Sandra with an expression of bald-faced disbelief, seeming not to know whether to laugh or bristle at the preposterous comment. For her part, Sandra felt an indignant bubbling begin brewing within her gut. Just who the hell did this entitled interloper think she was? "I'm sorry, not to be rude or anything, but how exactly did you get in here?" Sandra found herself asking in as neutral a tone as she could muster. This time it was Meghan's turn to look bemused. "Well, I marched right past those terribly impolite assistants working the front desk, of course. I have a knack for getting straight to the true decision-makers on any project I set my sights on." She turned to address the room at large, clearly sensing she had everyone's rapt attention. "Look, I realize my credentials aren't as established as some would like in this industry. But I've been doing the hard work exploring all sorts of potential avenues for my interests and talents. Podcasting, writing, public speaking, I even have a burgeoning foray into crochet apparel design." As Meghan rambled on extemporaneously about her collection of artisanal home-sourced knits, Sandra heard Nicole stifle what sounded like a muffled giggle beside her. Part of her wanted to join in on the absurdity of it all, but a larger part found this woman's audacious presumption rankling. And like I said, what better way to introduce the Meghan brand to the big screen than as the third Swanee for this fiercely feminist supernatural romp? Meghan concluded with an ostentatious spreading of her arms. "You'd be utterly daft to not even entertain the notion, wouldn't you agree?" That was the final straw for Sandra. She rose abruptly from her seat, fixing Meghan with a look of stern appraisal that instantly robbed the room of its mirth. "I'm going to stop you right there, miss," she said in a tone of barely restrained irritation. This kind of delusional self-importance and entitlement is precisely why you seem to keep shooting yourself in the foot at every turn. Meghan opened her mouth to protest, but Sandra barreled onward undeterred. Do you have any actual professional acting experience or formal training? Any understanding of the hilariously distorted version of fame and success you seem to be chasing? This grandiose show you just waltzed in here with proves you've bought into your own hype on a dangerous level. Out of the corner of her eye, Sandra noticed Nicole watching her with an intent but unreadable look. The rest of the room seemed to have gone utterly still and silent. Meghan, for her part, appeared momentarily stunned into uncharacteristic speechlessness. She clearly wasn't accustomed to having her lofty self-assurances questioned so bluntly. I think you might be overreacting just a tad, she finally managed in a tone of wounded dignity. I only wanted to throw my proverbial hat into the ring, so to speak. Explore an opportunity, creatively speak. No, you wanted to chase the bright lights and cameras again at any and all costs, Sandra cut her off curtly. And that kind of ego-driven delusion poisons any chance at sustainable success or growth. Meghan reeled back, stung. That's rather a lot of unearned negativity and judgment, isn't it? She shot a pointed look around the room. Really, everyone, isn't Sandra being just a tad gratuitously cruel and small-minded about all this? Sandra felt a humorless smirk twist her lips as she shook her head slowly. See? That's exactly what I'm talking about. The inability to accept criticism or even polite refusal. This desperation to always be the center of attention and deludedly presume you can just insert yourself into any endeavor, it's unbecoming. But at least it's gotten clearer and clearer with each embarrassing fiasco you keep churning out. Meghan looked as though she'd been slapped. For a long moment, she could only gape at Sandra in a wordless mask of stricken indignation. Just then, Nicole rose smoothly from her seat beside Sandra. All eyes turned towards her as she gently rested a hand on her friend's forearm in a subtle signal for restraint. Sandy's pretty spot on here, love, she intoned coolly towards Meghan, her melodious Aussie accent a jarring contrast to the flinty look in her eyes. And I think I speak for both of us, as well as everyone else who's had to witness your remarkably no-note shtick of late, when I say your utter disregard for any advice or self-awareness is really starting to grow quite stale and grating. Sandra felt a rush of gratification to hear Nicole's blunt co-signing of her firm stance. Of course her friend would have her back against such a tone-deaf diva. Meghan's head whipped around towards Nicole, mouth working silently as she struggled to formulate a rebuttal. But Nicole was already pressing on in that same almost casual cadence. See, you seem to fancy yourself a fellow actress of some serious gravitas and insight. But really, you're just a former cable TV brief objection of reality at this point, love. A sort of, moderately raj one-trick pony who's eagerly drank your own Kool-Aid, as it were. Meghan looked utterly poleaxed in the wake of Nicole's verbal evisceration. What little self?